So for the heck of it, I'm going to do a little bit of a book review. As part of one of the classes that I'm in, we have this 40 book challenge, and so I've tried to take on the competition and read quite a bit more. And one of the books that I just read was Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You by Brain Neimeier. And the title entertains me because it reminds me of this old SNL sketch about credit cards and how they said, if I don't have something and I want to buy it, but I don't have the money, what should I do? And they're like, don't buy it. And it's a one-page pamphlet just saying, don't buy it. And so it reminds me a little bit of that. But this is the first Brain Neimeier book that I have read. He's got a lot of fantasy and science fiction stuff that I'm going to look into next. A lot of mecha, and so I love anime mecha. So I think that that might be very interesting. But I know of him because I am a frequent viewer and reader of David V. Stewart, and I enjoy his stuff. And so I'm being more and more exposed to sort of the independent publishing world and people who share similar values that I do, who are also involved in creating art, but creating art based on a certain worldview, but not preaching explicitly that worldview in such a way that it gets in the way of storytelling. But this book in particular is nonfiction, and as you can imagine from the title, it's Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You. Well, what does Brain Neimeier mean by that? He means that our media construct as it is today, our legacy media, Hollywood, the major industries that produce the entertainment which we consume, are ideologically as opposed to about half of the country as you could possibly be. And to those in Hollywood, those making decisions, anybody to the right of Mao is worthy of derision. And just think about it this way. Think in the last 20 years, try to think of the amount of times you've seen in a story told, whether on television, whether on film, whether through video games, a religious figure who is a good person and who actually follows their moral compass and who doesn't end up being the villain, either by being a hypocrite or by being like an right out and out villain. It's going to be hard to find them. There is not, rarely in Hollywood is there a depiction of a virtuous religious person. And the vast majority of the world is religious. And yet, we have a secular culture that hates actively religious people. And you can tell that by the art that they produce. And conservatives for far too long and non-political people have given these people their money because we haven't thought, I think a lot of times didn't think explicitly about what that means to do so. And conservatives and libertarians and non-political people tend to be more individualistic and tend to think less about working as a group towards a goal. And so people have continued to consume art even though the explicit message is that they think you're dumb, they think you're bad, and a better future is without you. And so it takes the other half of the country to begin to say, we're not going to spend our money giving it to people who explicitly don't want us in the future, who their version of utopia is with an absence of us. And that we have to take that money and we have to put it towards people whom, at the bare minimum, if they don't share our values, at least have a traditional classical liberal view of live and let live. And that I might not think the way you think, but you have the right to be here, and you have a right to your own space, and you have a right to your own voice, and you have a right to prosper as you will. And so it's a call for us to get into the creative space, both financially, and then also those of us who want to engage in art to do so in our own manner. And we've never been in a better time to do that, where we do not need the traditional structures in order to get these projects launched and across. We live in a huge, wonderful, opportune time for individuals to speak up and to tell stories that align with their worldview. And so I enjoyed the book. It did a good job of explaining why, not just saying this is the case, but giving explicit evidence as to the beliefs of those in power in these traditional media companies and their viewpoints on the rest of us. This is particularly, I think, pertinent. This book was particularly pertinent as the Gina Carano's story came out, and then her, instead of just surrendering, has decided to join up with the Daily Wire to start production. And I hope they're successful in that. It will take a long time, I think, for them to produce products that are on parity with Hollywood, because it's just creating film is a difficult process and requires lots of resources. I hope that they're just do a good job of doing good storytelling without a infusion of like explicit moral, value statements that sometimes might, unfortunately, too often conservative or religious material has that the pure flick style, like beating you over the head with the particular message. I don't like that when it comes from the left, which is doing that exceedingly so. They're actually falling victim of the same thing that one could criticize a lot of the religious art of the last 10, 20 years of being overbearing with the message and not really caring about the quality. And so he does a good job of providing evidence, and he also gives us reasonable ways in which we can disengage from feeding that monster and to begin to put our resources towards things that are life-giving. And recognizing that thing in which Ben Shapiro always says, which is that politics is downstream of culture, and that it is time for those of us who do not share the same values as the mainstream media or legacy media to begin to involve ourselves in the creative work and to grow and to take criticism and to hopefully produce things which stand the test of time that people can look at 100 years from now and recognize as fulfilling and complex and life-giving art. So I enjoyed the book. It's a short read. It's under 100 pages. It is worth your time if you're interested in how your financial engagement with media feeds into an agenda that might be counter to your own world, and that we who don't share those same values need to be wise and more explicit about how we spend our money to propagate what we value. All right, so that is my review of Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You by Brain Neimeier. It is worth spending I think it's $5 right now on Amazon Kindle. And so go ahead, pick it up, support an independent author, and hopefully learn a thing or two.